Hi everyone, this is Pradeep from Sydney. On a cold, wintry day, where I believe in Melbourne the temperatures have dropped to minus 2 degrees. But fortunately, I am talking to you at a sane hour today. It is just 3:30 in the afternoon. A very good morning, good evening, good night, or whatever it is in your part of the world. I am delighted to bring to you yet another episode of GCC. And it is indeed a great session that I am myself looking forward to. We've got some great leaders today giving perspectives on a range of subjects. And to kickstart the discussion, normally I am a gentleman, I invite the ladies, first, but today, considering that there is quite a lot being discussed, I will start with our distinguished speaker. And who is that? Well, I'll keep that a secret and I'll get my friend Vishvesh Prabhakar to introduce this gentleman. Vishvesh is an IIT Delhi alumni and he is the growth market leader for sustainable value chains at Accenture. Now, somebody who's making waves in sustainability and somebody will be having at GCC in the month of July. So, first of all, folks, please give a big round of applause for Vishvesh. And Vishvesh, over to you to introduce our speaker of the day. Over to you, Vishvesh. You are on mute, Vishvesh.
Thank you so much, Pradeep. I'm privileged to introduce our special guest for today's session, Dr. Mukund Rajan, whom I know for close to 5 years now. Dr. Rajan graduated from BTech program at the Indian Institute of Technology, Delhi in 1989. He went on to Oxford on a Rhodes Scholarship to complete his master's and doctorate in international relations. His doctoral dissertation, titled Global Environment Politics, was very precise as it dwelled on forecasting possible conflicts between developed and developing world on funding for climate risks and mitigation way back in the 90s, which we see as a big topic of discussion on global climate agenda. He's the chairman of ECube Investment Advisors, a first of its kind platform created in 2019 to engage and empower Indian corporates on ESG agenda. Prior to this, he spent 23 years with the Tata Group, where he was the chairman of Tata Global Sustainability Council and had the privilege to meet up with him in Jamshedpur way back then. He also served as the chief ethics officer of the group, first brand custodian, and member of the group executive council. He was the managing director of Tata Teleservices and played an important role in its turnaround, and also served on the boards of various Tata companies such as Tata Communications, Tata Singapore Airlines, and Tata AIG. In 2007, the World Economic Forum honored Dr. Rajan as a young global leader. Dr. Rajan is also author of 3 books. His doctorate dissertation was published as a book by Oxford. He's also authored Brand Custodian, which is a biography and also dwells on his transformation journey at the Tata Group. More recently, he has co-authored a book titled Outlast, which focuses on how Indian corporations can enhance their ESG quotient. Dr. Rajan serves as the chairman of the Environment Committee of Federation of Indian Chambers of Commerce and Industry, FICCI, where also had the privilege to work with him as well. Dr. Rajan, thank you for joining us today and a very warm welcome from all of us. Pradeep, over to you.
A big round of applause for Mukund. And Mukund, I am absolutely delighted to have you over here. Before
Thank
I
you.
kickstart my discussion with you, let me just tell the audience who the other speakers of the day are. Along with Mukund, we have 2 other speakers. One is a lovely lady from Silchar, Risha Mal, and I will introduce Risha when we get her on the spot. We normally enjoy putting people on the spot. And of course, we've got another lovely person from Switzerland, Naveen Mittal, and more about Naveen when we have him on the stand. But more importantly, I wanted to introduce three other leaders who you see, the concept now that I'm bringing forward is getting what I call as a leaders panel, people who are making a difference in their respective professions and who I do not expect to be, talking on subjects which are their expertise. I want them to give their perspectives as leaders and also ask questions from our speakers of the day. And for that, I have this lovely lady from San Francisco, Shobna. And more about Shobna when I finish off first session with Mukund. But needless to say, she's been doing absolutely gangbusters in her professional career. But she's a lovely person otherwise. And two other leaders, Ambassador Pradeep Kapoor, and who, as the name suggests, is has been an ambassador for Government of India and at the moment involved in quite a few things, as well as Dinesh Sikand, who's been in Director General and senior leadership roles in the military services with Government of India. So with that, we will kickstart the session with Mukund. Mukund, first of all, tell me, why did you go to Oxford? Well, you got a scholarship or something, or what? You loved the gardens over there, or what was the story?
Well, honestly, I could only afford to go there because I got a scholarship, the Rhodes Scholarship.
Fabulous.
And the beauty of the Rhodes Scholarship is it allows you to look at any field of study that you're interested in. So even though I'd done a degree in engineering, the BTech at IIT Delhi, they actually allowed me to do a program, the master's program at that, in international relations, which is a subfaculty of political science. And that was, it always been an area of interest for me, even in school. So very, very fortunate. And I ended up doing the master's and then the doctorate.
So nice, and I'm sure that you are aware of Ashoka University, and
Absolutely.
and and I had Pramath on one of the GCC sessions over here, and I was asking him that what made him think of a liberal arts university in a country like India where there are kind of competing requirements across, and what you mentioned resonates very well with what they had in mind. So tell me, after you finished Oxford, then did you join what is called as TAS, Tata Administrative Services?
Correct, correct. In fact, the year I joined the TAs, they actually, for the first and probably the last time in the history, organized a special set of interviews in the month of September for overseas candidates. And it was something they've not repeated after that. But I was very fortunate. I came back from Oxford in August, interviewed with the Tatas in September, and joined them in the following January. And then I ended up doing the Bharat Darshan and training with the next TAs batch, which joined typically in May. So I had a very unusual entry into the group.
So did you join TAS because you got a free Bharat Darshan?
Well, I was told that the TAs had never turned down anyone who had gone to Oxford and had applied to them. I had missed out on the entire economic liberalization reforms situation, the impact on the economy from 89 to 94 when I was outside the country. And I thought it was a great way to sort of understand what had changed in India in the years that been out would be to join the corporate world and join an organization like Tata's. So
So
that was my first choice.
fabulous. So see, one thing very interesting, if I recall, you were in the powerhouse. I mean, you were working with Ratan Tata. Which year to which year was that?
So the first year of the TAs, you do assignments at different Tata companies, you do the Bharat Darshan, and then you get placed in a company. And the theory is you'll do 3, 4 years with one company, move to another company, maybe in a different function. And over 15 years, you're sort of ready for senior leadership roles of the group. In my case, I had a very unusual path because I joined Ratan Tata right after I finished my induction the first year. And therefore, from 1996 all the way through to 2008, 12 years on the trot, I worked with one man. So I had a very different sort of journey in the Tatas.
So, did you kind of feel the power? Like I don't remember how many billions, hundreds of billions, is the market capitalization of the Tata Group. and being at that particular this thing, how did it feel?
Well, that's something I'm often asked. You know, from the outside, it seems very glamorous and it seems like there's awesome power in that office of the chairman of a group as large as Tata, as India's largest corporate house. But the fact of the matter is, when you're on the inside, you don't feel any of that glamour. You're just working very, very hard. And I can tell you, Ratan Tata himself, and perhaps more so because as an individual, he also carried the Tata name, was under huge stress. I mean, every day of his working life, and that continues even today, in a sense, he personified everything that the group stood for. Anything that went wrong or was a challenge or was a problem immediately got associated with his name. If there was a problem on the group companies, you'd open the morning papers and it would be his face on the front page, like as if he was personally responsible. And he took it personally as well. So the criticism, the critique, the challenges, I mean, he became the face of the group and he really related to it very, very intimately. And that therefore meant all of us in the office were supporting him, also shared the stress and the challenges. So it's not glamorous at all on the inside, is what I'm trying to say.
See, I also, you know, want to go back to the book that you wrote immediately after you finished Oxford, which was about the global politics around the environment, you know. Now, I suppose the question which really comes to my mind is that it is almost, well, that must have been what, 90s, and today is 20 to 30 years back almost.
Correct.
Has the global politics changed insofar as the environment and sustainability is concerned?
Not really, not really. In fact, the same issues are alive today. I mean, people are worrying about climate change, global warming, tropical deforestation, loss of biodiversity. All of those issues are with us even today, 30 years later. What I speculated about in my book at that time was whether these issues, because they're global issues, no one country can resolve them on its own, that they offer a novel new bargaining leverage to developing countries to negotiate for better terms of technology transfer, concessional finance, and so on. And at that time, it was very recently at that point of time that the ozone depletion issue, the Antarctic ozone hole, had just got resolved through a platform called the Montreal Protocol, which actually offered technology and concessional finance to developing countries. And I was trying to see whether these other issues that were emerging would give them similar sort of capabilities to bargain for a better deal for themselves, which would also be a just deal. I don't think they've made any progress in terms of negotiation in the last 30 years. And today the situation has changed because now these countries also understand that they're potentially the largest victims of these problems. You've already seen in just the last few weeks in India, unprecedented heat waves in parts of the country, for instance, the impact that has on farmers and people's ability to go out, schools being shut and kids not being able to go to school because of the weather. I think you're going to see much more of this in the years ahead. And developing countries, therefore, now are in a very awkward situation. If they delay action on these issues, they will be very big victims. And at the same time, they do realize that it's not very fair, that a global system that has evolved on the basis of use of fossil fuels has seen huge advantages to the developed world, where the developing countries are now trying to catch up. Suddenly the rules of the game have changed. But that's the reality of the situation we face today.
So, I also want to go to what you are doing now. Among so many other things, you have entered into some agreement with National Stock Exchange for effectively creating a platform for enabling green finance to list. So, could you tell me and the audience more about what exactly this is?
So this is an effort to create a new stock exchange, essentially, that will facilitate the trading of all manner of sustainability-linked products. This will be actually housed out of Gift City in Gandhinagar. And the idea for doing it out of Gift City is actually to make it much easier and more convenient for foreign capital, principally, to come in and go out. The sense that we have currently is that the bulk of the capital that India needs, and indeed other markets in this part of the world will need to support the shift towards better sustainability practices, will come from outside the region. And therefore, we felt it is important to create a platform that would attract foreign capital. And Gift City, of course, has been structured in a way that permits this to happen. We're hoping to launch the exchange in the second half of this calendar year. Our partner is obviously the National Stock Exchange, which is India's largest stock exchange. And the first products that will be traded on this exchange will typically be green bonds. We are hopeful that the Government of India's own sovereign green bond offering could potentially be one of the products that gets listed on the exchange. But in the future, we intend to move it towards other products, climate bonds, social bonds, forestry projects. So anything that has a sustainability veneer and can be packaged in the form of a financial instrument and traded, we would like to offer of this exchange. And also to ensure that we preserve the integrity of the participants in the exchange, anyone who wants to list a product will have to go through two filters. One in terms of their own environment, social, and governance performance, ESG performance. And second, they will also have to measure up to certain standards that will be prescribed for each of the products in turn. So green bonds will have specific standards as climate bonds and so on. So that is the effort. And we want to make it an international exchange that will attract not just companies and capital from obviously this part of the world, but from anywhere in the world to really participate in this exchange.
That is fabulous. The only thing that the feeling that I get is, when I look at, I'm living in Australia, and we had elections very recently. And in fact, the Liberals lost the election because a lot of people voted for independents who were supporting climate change. But having said that, there is another imperative that Australia exports about $100 billion worth of coal. There are jobs at risk. So while the imperative is understood, but the cost of transitioning to a green economy, who's going to pay for that? Yes, it's nice to say that, otherwise, we will have temperature rises and the extreme kind of a thing. Where do you get the trade-off between development and sustainability?
No, it's a big question, and for countries like India, you have so many companies that are going to face this threat of stranded assets if they're in quote unquote old economy kind of businesses with a significant reliance on fossil fuels. Take a company like Coal India, for instance, 350,000 employees, probably a million odd pensioners. If that company has to shut down coal production in the years to come, what's going to happen to all of these people? A large part of Eastern India relies on the value chain that supports the coal industry. So you're absolutely right. That's a big question mark. That's part of what the government has been lobbying for at the international level in terms of greater financial transfers to support what is called the just transition. So that would be one route to get some amount of concessional financing from the developed world to support this transition. But I think if you turn your attention to the private sector, many companies are now seeing the writing of the wall. If you want to continue to participate in the value chains of large multinational enterprises, you have to now start adapting to a net zero world. And therefore, they're making their own plans. So if you look at India's largest companies, Adani, Ambani, the Tatas, all of them now have announced net zero or 100% movement to renewables. They've got big plans in spaces like green hydrogen. So I think you're going to see a lot more investment in R&D and new technology, trying to equip these companies proactively so that they are ahead of the curve compared to their peers and to come out, in good shape on the other side. So it's a mixed bag right now. Companies that can't afford it and are going to be in a very, very difficult situation will probably need government bailouts. And large parts of the private sector, particularly the large caps, who are getting ready and have some very interesting plans and even see this as an opportunity to leapfrog ahead of others.
So now on a different tangent altogether, which is, when I look at you, there are a couple of things which come straight to my mind. One is, the engine room of the Tata Group. Second is sustainability. The third is ethics. The fourth is, brand custodian, and so many other aspects. But let me now move across to um, what I would call it as ethics. Now, how does what is the role of a group ethics officer? Is it like a policeman?
A little bit. So when I took on the role, we did actually two very important things. The first was we revisited our code of conduct. We had a code of conduct in Tata's from 1998 onwards. But we felt by 2014-15, when I was in the role, that it was no longer fit for purpose. It was a very old style code of conduct. It was like Moses and the 10 Commandments, talking down to the employees, thou shalt not do this, thou shalt not do that, else, the heavy hand of your employer is going to come down on you. We felt things had changed dramatically. Our workforce is much younger. We had to have a much more equitable sort of relationship between what Tata Sons, as the owner of the brand, was expecting from companies and from employees in terms of behavior and ethical conduct, and the responsiveness of the work. So we recast the entire code of conduct, benchmarked at some of the best codes in the world. So that is one activity I was very proud of undertaking at that time. It's very important for our group, given our stage of evolution. The second, as you said, is being a little bit of a policeman. We had left it essentially to companies to really, self-certify that they were compliant with the code of conduct. But we had no mechanisms to actually measure how the group was performing. And as they say, if you can't measure it, you can't improve it. So we started for the first time in our group's history, putting down a set of indicators and measures to see how companies are actually performing on their claims to ethical conduct, and are they actually living up to the promise of the Tata brand. And that was, I think, a very important initiative, to the extent where Tata Sons, in a sense, started auditing all the group companies and sending reports on the audit conclusions to the boards of those companies and to the chairman of those companies. So it got discussed at the highest levels in those organizations as well. That was one way of ensuring that the unity of the group, the sort of focus on values was sustained. That, I think, is very important to holding these kinds of groups together for the future.
Now, moving on to the other part of the equation, which is as a brand custodian. Now, was it like you calculate the market value, the brand value, and then you put a lock on door and say that, hey, it can't go down, it has to go up? So, what was the role of a brand custodian?
Well, no. Those are outcomes that you feel pleased with. But I think the most important job you have is to essentially ensure that the key determinants of what creates brand value and what sustains your brand equity in the market are maintained. In our case, part of the reason I actually ended up with the roles of ethics officer and chair of the Sustainability Council was because our then chairman, Cyrus Mistry, actually felt deeply and passionately, and I was totally in agreement with him on this, that the Tata brand has been built on these two twin pillars: our reputation for ethical conduct and good corporate governance, and our reputation for giving back to society. And therefore, he felt whoever looks after the brand has to actually be responsible for these two other elements of what Tata stand for, which I thought was a very unique and differentiated way of thinking about the brand. So my job then became to really look at how are we supporting the brand in terms of our reputation, in terms of our commitments on CSR and sustainability and so on. So many activities that we rolled out on the back of that I think have done the brand well. In fact, just yesterday, I think Brand Finance came out with its latest report, and the Tatas continue to be India's most powerful corporate brand. So that has hopefully
I read
some
that
role
actually.
in.
And I was remembering you when I read that article. So fabulous. Now, at this particular point in time, I'll open it up to our leaders panel. And I will, now being the gentleman, I would start with Shobna. Shobna, are you there? I know that you are there. So over to you first. I want you to give your perspectives on what Mukund has been saying, and also put him on a spot and ask him questions.
Thanks, Pradeep. Thanks for organizing the session. And Mukund, thank you so much for your insights. I really enjoyed listening to you and learned new things. I have a couple of questions. I'll start with a question around metrics. I'm a business operations professional, so I go a lot by metrics and holding the team accountable via metrics. So question for you is, both for sustainability as well as the ethics roles that you've had, what were some of the metrics that you held your team accountable to on both those dimensions?
Sure. So on sustainability, actually, very interestingly, there's a whole new set of metrics that are going to be applicable in the Indian market. There's something called the Business Responsibility and Sustainability Report that the Securities and Exchange Board of India is now mandating on a compulsory basis for the top 1,000 listed companies. And they've issued a guidance note on all the parameters relating to environment, social, and governance. So if you haven't seen that, I urge you to take a look at that, because from next year, I think it's going to be much greater transparency in terms of how corporate India is doing in sustainability. But on the ethics issue, I think it is much more interesting. And I'm now trying to recollect. We had essentially 4 categories in which we asked companies to make disclosures on what they were doing. These were leadership, organization structure, communication, and measurement of effectiveness. And in each of those categories, we asked them to really spell out the key initiatives and the key measures that they thought are relevant for their business. And I'm trying to recollect things, for instance, on measurement of effectiveness. We looked at the number of cases that were getting reported on issues like harassment, frauds, stuff of that nature. When you looked at leadership, you looked at the way the board was organized, how often board committees met during the year to discuss the ethics agenda, who was really responsible within the organization for prosecuting an agenda around ethics. When you looked at communications, you looked at the frequency with which companies would put out information, newsletters. Some companies would organize ethics weeks during the years, invite guest speakers. So for each of those, based on what they reported, we try and get them to put some tangible data, and then we try and benchmark it across the group. And based on what we felt was the best sort of practices across group companies, we would then slot people into different sort of brackets. So the best were the advanced companies. Then we'd have companies that are emerging, and there are companies that are at a very basic level. So it was really to create a sort of peer pressure amongst the group companies, try and learn from each other, figure out what the best guys are doing, and then try and implement that themselves, and therefore elevate the whole discussion agenda. So that's really the way we try to create a bit more tangible sense of what it means to position yourself as a very ethical company. Then, of course, companies would participate, some of them in international surveys, studies. Ethisphere would regularly rate companies like Tata Steel, for instance, amongst the most ethical companies of the world. So we had a good sense that we were sort of approaching this in the right way to make sure people have a better and more tangible sense of what it means to be regarded as an ethical operation, ethical company.
Super helpful. My second and last question for you, Mukund, would be, you said something earlier in the talk around things haven't changed much in the last 30 years. Some of the challenges are still the same. So curious on your perspective in terms of why that is the case, and then what suggestion or what advice you would have both for individuals as well as leaders to ensure that we don't go another 30 years without making any progress on this dimension.
So, I mean, the science, I think, has got better. So I probably need to caveat what I said by the fact that 30 years back, perhaps the science wasn't as clear. And that's why even in the US, for instance, you could have a Trump come and get away with some of the statements he made because, they could point to gaps in the understanding of things like climate change, global warming. But I think a lot of that has increasingly got corrected and got fixed. And now it is really impossible for somebody to say that global warming is not happening, or you don't believe that extreme climatic events are going to be happening with greater frequency, because you're seeing it all around you and people are now experiencing it. I'm hopeful that as the developed world itself becomes a victim in many ways, and you're seeing that with forest fires in the United States, with flooding in large parts of Europe and so on. Australia had huge issues last year. I think now there is a much greater sense of urgency that the global community has to fix these issues. The European Union has now brought in the carbon border adjustment mechanism. So they're all thinking of ways in which they can make sure the agenda gets lifted. And if they really try and push that very hard, they will undoubtedly need support of the developing countries. And that is where I think finally you can have more equitable negotiation around fine. We'll also come to the party as developing countries, India, China, and the rest. But this is some of the support we're going to need. This is some of the help that industries that are going to be in stranded sectors are going to need. And here's some of the list of requirements we have on technology. I think that conversation is much more likely now to take place because the developed world is also experiencing, some of the big challenges. So it's still not certain that this is the way it's going to play out. The developing countries have been, hollering for a long time about this $100 billion a year of transfers that need to take place for them to make the climate transition effectively. It's been promised, it's not been delivered. At Glasgow again last year at COP26 as talked about. So we'll see. But in the meantime, I think the developing world is also putting its best foot forward. India, for instance, the focus on pushing the agenda on renewables. By 2030, we're promising that we'll have 500 gigawatts of non-fossil fuel energy delivered in this market, 50% at least from renewables. So I think those kinds of measures will also be helpful and at least put us in the role of a statesman. So we're not just seen to be blackmailing the rest of the world, but we're seen to be playing our part in contributing to the solution, but also asking for help from the developed world. So I think that will play a big part. On the regulatory side, in India, I mentioned the BRSR, which SEBI has now put out. I think you're going to see much greater transparency coming in the market in terms of what corporates are doing. And I think there is a buildup of pressure from stakeholders, including the retail audience, customers, citizens, the judiciary, expecting corporate India to do more. I think COVID has had a role to play in people's expectations of a better quality of life. And I think if they don't see corporates responding to that agenda, corporates will start getting punished. People will stop investing in them. They'll stop finding it easy to sort of raise loans. Raising money in the capital markets will become increasingly difficult. So I think there is an agenda that is going to push corporates towards more responsible behavior because of the widespread interest in now seeing progress in sustainability questions. So I think it's all coming together. We're not there yet. It's probably another few years away, but I think all moving in the right direction, hopefully.
So thank you very much, Shobna, and I will get you back when the other speakers come in. And for everybody's benefit, just to give you a bit of Shobna's background, she is a BTech from IIT Delhi, she's a master's from Stanford, she's the MBA from Chicago Booth School, and she has worked with McKinsey's, eBay, LinkedIn, and now she is the vice president of a health company which is making waves. And more about that, and it was 10:30 in the night, so I'm really thankful to Shobna for joining in at the late time. Now I'll move across to Ambassador Pradeep Kapoor. Pradeep, just like Mukund was, in the powerhouse, you were the representative of the government of India in various countries. Now, just like Mukund has written 3 books, you have written 7 books into diverse areas, including something about health and so on and so forth. I want your perspectives on what Mukund has been saying, as well as any questions that you want to ask him.
Well, thank you very much, Pradeep. First of all, congratulations to you for doing this phenomenal work, which you keep on doing 24/7, 365 days of the year. So it's always good to connect with you. It's about 2 a.m. here in Washington, D.C.
Yeah, that is what I was going to say, that both Pradeep Kapoor and Dinesh, they're on the US East Coast, and I really appreciate both of you joining in at such an unearthly hour. But I wanted to make sure you guys also keep awake, like just like I do sometimes. But anyway,
Yes. Not every day like you, but some days it's okay. Because sometimes for various meetings in India, we have been doing that all our lives in the Indian Foreign Service, because that is also part of a job which is the day you enter that it's a 24/7 job. So I've kept awake from midnight till 8 a.m., for example, for consultation meetings with Delhi online. But anyway, good to hear from Mukund. Mukund, I've known your brother for a very long time, Raghuram.
I see.
And I've known, of course, Mr. Ratan Tata. I met him on various occasions, when Prime Minister Narasimha Rao came to Paris, for example. He was in the business delegation. Ratan Tata was in the business delegation.
Right,
And
right.
on many other occasions. And I've had a lot of overlap with the Tatas. And also I was in Oxford, but didn't go the TAS route, went the IAS route. So I was probably the first person from IIT Delhi to join the Indian Foreign Service.
Wow.
I'm glad to know that Dinesh joined the civil services 10 years ahead of me. But there was nobody in the Indian Foreign Service that I knew who had joined from IIT Delhi. And now there are quite a few. So I keep on bumping into them all over the world. But, primarily, I guess, Tata's, there are two aspects which I would like to discuss. Firstly, you talked about climate change. I'm glad that Tatas are playing such a leadership role, because even in 2014, Pradeep Khanna, my counterpart, my friend, very dear friend, not just friend, one of my closest friends, for whom I have a lot of respect. When there was a lot of dark clouds on the horizon of climate change, and I was very closely associated with the issue of climate change in various capacities, including as professor in the University of Maryland. So at that stage, the United Nations, for example, decided, with some good partnership with India also, to change the whole thing upside down, because every year the COPs had been taking place, the conference of parties all over the world, and there was no progress. It was a very, very bleak scenario, with India and other countries being painted as black sheep or outliers, always fighting against any progress on climate change, absolutely unjustifiably, primarily by the Western world. Mukund has touched upon it, alluded to it very briefly, but I was at the forefront of challenging all that also in some ways, that after the Industrial Revolution was taken away by the colonial countries from colonies like India by loot primarily, and after having managed to use all our resources for their development, then to deny us the same development path on the basis of climate change was absolutely, historically, a very great crime, I would say, nothing less than that. But in New York, what happened in 2014, I'll touch upon it very briefly, then I'll touch upon some other points. The UN for the first time got together. Earlier the discussions on climate change had been taking place within the community of scientists, technologists, engineers, media sometimes, others, like the CSO, civil society organizations, etc. Slowly, the circle expanded to include the bureaucracies, then the leadership and policy makers from the government, besides certain other parts of bureaucracy, diplomacy, etc. But the industry very cleverly kept away from the whole discussion, even though they were the main culprits towards creating all this pollution and difficulties with climate, the primary source of all the climate change issues, greenhouse gas emissions, etc. So for the first time in September 2014 in the United Nations, all the parties involved, the civil society organizations, the bureaucracies, the political leadership, the media, and scientists and others, were asked to join together along with the business people, and Ratan Tata was also there, one of the industry, and some of the industry representatives, where the industry then took on a very responsible role for the first time. And that is how the change started happening in climate change, finally. And then it's been a positive, with the aspects of INDCs, for example, intended nationally determined contributions, and also common but differentiated responsibilities, etc. So I'll not get into a technical discussion on that. This is not the right forum. But what I'd like to say is, with the Tatas, what sort of, we talked about ethics and branding and all that. The challenges which foreign service officers face in different parts of the world are infinite. There's no other word for that. In Chile, when I was ambassador there, when I reach into that assignment into Chile, into Santiago, one of the first things I learned after the very first few days of my arrival, big broad headlines in the newspapers: Tata's are like a criminal organization. That is a painting being done by the media in Chile on certain grounds where Tatas were put in the dock. The criminal prosecution was going on against the Tatas there. It was TCS primarily because some consultant for the government of Chile, when they were trying to set up the civil registry, tender RFP, had gone and joined the Tata group as an advisor. And he had formulated the terms and conditions of the tender of the RFP. So every 2 weeks, a big article would come out against the Tatas. Tata is doing this, Tata is doing that. And the public prosecutor of Chile was, and this is a very interesting story, and it could be a case study, was trying to paint the Tatas absolutely in very deep dark colors. And Tatas were banned from bidding for any project in Chile. And they were trying to extend the ban to other parts of Latin America and to USA and Canada and Mexico, etc. Because she was writing letters to all the countries that what are the other wrong things which the Tatas are doing in your country? Please let us know. So that sort of situation was existing. So I started challenging that situation. I said that if Chile and India have to work together, if Indian industry has to work in Chile, if Indian investments have to come into Chile, if Indian business has to come into Chile, painting one of the brightest stars on the horizon in India in these sort of terms is absolutely unacceptable. So getting to the root of it and trying to then resolve it in discussions with the justice minister, who almost told me that you're interfering in the judicial, sub judice matters in Chile, and putting it on a bilateral agenda of India and Chile, and having it discussed at very senior levels of our government and their government at every meeting thereafter, till it got thrashed out. Because what happened was, even one of the chief persons in Tata was looking after, I'll just tell you his name, a South Indian officer, very bright, young, not young, very senior, who was also the judge in the SIT case in Gujarat.
Oh, Raghavan.
Raghavan came to Chile, and he came as Raghavan. He didn't come as Raghavan of Tatas. I said, why have you come as Raghavan as an individual? He said, if I come as Raghavan of Tatas, I'll be arrested on arrival in the airport. So I said, well, not under my tenure here. While I'm here, nobody's going to touch you. But that was the threat which the Tata organization faced in Chile, that anybody from Tata's India would be arrested on arrival. That was the perception. So anyway, we discussed it. We, talked to the Chilean side. We understood the lay of the land. And they had been talking about so many things that, Tatas will not be allowed to do anything. But suffice it to say that with all the sort of counter challenges which we posed to them, asking them to resolve it in a very quick sort of manner, time frame, the punishments which were meted out to TCS were minuscule. Some of the, the president of Tata Chile, who also became the president of Tata Latin America later, is still Henry Manzano, is still the Tata Latin America president. There were some 2 or 3 people who were given 30 hours of community service. This consultant who had migrated to the government side, the investigation would still continue, and Tatas were allowed to bid for any contract anywhere at all without any hindrance except for the civil registry contract. And then we had a large number of Indian companies coming into Chile, and the whole situation got resolved in a very positive manner, and Tatas were, again, the flag was flying high. So, but what I'd like to ask Mukund is about the progress since you're in touch with the NSE. I was told about the social sector exchange, which is being set up also in India. And some other countries also tried it earlier in Europe. How is that going? And what is the future of that, Mukund, if you'd like to touch on that?
So my understanding is it is still in stage where a lot of discussions around how best to launch this. It will be done in all likelihood as an additional platform from the existing exchanges. So I don't think the talk currently is that there'll be a new exchange, but the National Stock Exchange and the Bombay Stock Exchange, as the two principal exchanges, will be encouraged to offer this as a separate platform. The effort is going to be to really support the matching of willing capital with needy aspirants, particularly not-for-profit organizations, but also social enterprise, which could include for-profit social enterprises. Now, this is something that is, it's unclear that the model of supporting the nonprofits on scale has necessarily worked very effectively in other markets. So what they're trying to do will be a first of its kind. And, we'll have to see how it evolves, but it's been very slow. They've talked about this in successive budgets for the past few years. And only now I'm beginning to see the first sort of frameworks from the regulator about how this whole thing is going to be actually put together and allowed to launch, but still very early days.
Thank you, Mukund, because I hope that this thing moves ahead faster. And when I has also known some of the others in the TAS, including Mayor Karan Singh Boni, my batchmate from the IIT Delhi, who joined the TAS long
Passed
back.
away, yeah.
Passed away, yeah, a few years back. Then Vishvesh Rangan also from the leadership. And Arun Kumar Singh was my batchmate in the IAS, who joined TAS briefly before moving to the IFS.
I see.
Yeah. So, but anyway, the other thing which I'd like to mention is that, like I discussed with Pradeep Khanna earlier, the Wheels Global Foundation, which is a Pan IIT USA entity, will be, having a very big event in India in November, which is called Rural Transformation for Global Growth. Sustainable global growth. So, the future of sustainable global growth can pivot on rural transformation. This will be in Banaras Hindu University, BHU, on November 11, 12, 13th. And Wheels Global Foundation is primarily a Pan IIT entity with membership drawn from all the IITs in India, in US, in Australia, all over the world. And they will be discussing how to impact 20% of the rural population in India, which at 897 million people is more than the continent of USA, and North America and South America combined. Let me put it that way. The entire continent, North and South America combined, is less than the rural population of India. So how to create a movement which can impact even 15-20% of this population, which would be 180 million, which is more than the population of many countries of the world. So towards that effort, since a lot of the participants here, I'm so happy to see so many of you here, are from IITs, and the purpose of Wheels is to leverage technology for social growth. The Stanford University is a very integral part of this. Johns Hopkins University is participating. A lot of other US and Indian universities will be onboarded soon. So I'd request as many of you as can to join in, and to people like Mukund, I would also request a substantial amount of sponsorship towards this effort through your organization, if possible. So I'd like to connect with you separately on that also. But any others who can support and sponsor this in whatever way, it would be very appreciated. Thank you, Pradeep.
Thank you very much, Pradeep, and thank you for staying awake so late. I appreciate that. Now I move across to Dinesh in Toronto. Although he prefers to call himself from Brampton, but Brampton is a place, it's a suburb in Toronto, and it's got a very high population of Indians. In fact, I remember that once when I landed in Toronto, the temperature was -8, -8. And I was shivering because in Sydney we don't get that kind of a temperature. And all these guys in Toronto were jumping up and down. Ah, what a lovely climate, because they're used to -30 degrees. So, Dinesh, uh, like I mentioned, has been Director General in the Military Engineering Services. He's some fascinating stories about what all he helped out in the Kargil war and all that. But he at the moment, when I see his LinkedIn post, I see a lot of nature loving posts and all that. But jokes apart, over to you, Dinesh, for your perspectives as well as any questions that you would like to ask.
Thanks, Pradeep, and excellent presentation by Mukund, of course. Outstanding. I thought I'll take this opportunity to present the military perspective
Excellent.
as to how we incorporate ESG in our life. I being a military engineer for a long time in India, how we went about it, actually, I thought, let me add that to this. First, let's take up the E part of it, the environment. As you must have seen in the cantonments in India, there is a huge amount of trees and plantations there. They are planned and planted. In fact, around the periphery of the cantonment, there will be 3 layers of trees, all planned in consultation with the agriculture people. And then, of course, there's the competitions of lawns and gardens there. So we encourage people to do that. That is one part, the green part, the climate part. The second part is the efficient use of energy. Now, we lay a great stress on that, and we ensure that the power factor in all our cantonments, this I did personally in Bangalore when I was Commander Works Engineer there, that is as close to 1 as possible. That means you do the most efficient use of energy which is given to you. And we pay, tons of money to the state government from where we take electricity for our respective cantonments, actually. Number 3, our waste disposal systems are outstanding. They're absolutely modern, depending on the size of the cantonment. So we take a lot of care in the environmental aspects of it. Also, we use a lot of concrete, of course, in multi-story buildings and all. And you know that carbon, the cement part of concrete generates about 8% of the carbon in the world, actually. So we try to minimize or optimize the use of concrete. Use high quality of concrete so that we use minimum, and we were already searching for replacement for cement. That's a big exercise going on all over the world, actually. Now let's come to the social aspects. I think they can't be better than they in anywhere other than the military. We are very conscious of our officers and jawans, and the contact is absolutely 100% between a commanding officer and his jawans. As an engineer, when I plan a cantonment, all the plans are first drawn, 3D models are made, families are invited. They go through the residential accommodation and tell us what they want, what is lacking, what is more important. The plans are then finalized, and then only we go for construction. And even during construction, they are welcome to visit us and keep telling us as a client as to what improvements can be done. The architecture, the color schemes are absolutely world class and planned in Jaisalmer. If I build a cantonment, it will have the same architecture feature as in the Jaisalmer fort. So that outside, when a tourist comes, the cantonment doesn't present a bad view to them. Also, most of our Jawans come from villages. No, they have never lived in regular houses like this. So we faced a problem. For example, 50 years back, when I was in Fazilka during the 71 war, actually, at that time. And when the war ended and we allowed families to come in, these people, we gave them first-class houses, but they didn't know how to use the kitchen. For example, they will store the coal in kitchen and cook in the veranda. And they will all sit on the floor and eat, whereas we have given them dining tables, chairs, and all that. Similarly, the people on the upper floor will go to the roof, take out water through a bucket from the tank and wash their clothes on the roof. And in the process, they'll damage the floating wall when the water will start leaking, and you'll have problems with that nature. Thirdly, in one case, we found that the families were from Northeast, and they have their culture is that the women remain topless most of the time. We were not really doing that, and we found that outside the main road of the cantonment, there used to be a lot of locals assembling there because these women used to move topless. So we took all this into view, built boundary walls, educated our Jawans. So as soon as they come, we made a SOP, standard operating procedure, and used to educate them how to live in the modern accommodation. I mean, no more going to the, to the khet for this thing. You have to, have a proper washroom and a kitchen and all that. So that was the social aspects actually. Also, we have a lot of bada khanas and Jawan officers parties where the social contexts are very important there. Now the governance part of it. I again say, I think this is the best part I have ever seen in anywhere. The governance is the best in the Army, Air Force and Navy actually. What we have done, we have designed military courses. One course is called Defense Services Staff College in Wellington, where we have people from Army, Air Force, Navy, IAS, IFS, IPS, all the whole gamut of the government of India. And they together for 1 year, not only learn the military tactics, they also interact with each other and understand policies and procedures of other departments. And they have bonding at that level. So that when they go back to their departments, they know the insight of how the forge works and what are the difficulties. And they clear their cases very fast. Then we have at a higher level course in National Defense College in Delhi, which is a level of brigadier, where we have ambassadors also. For example, I have a friend called Gautam, who became first ambassador to Afghanistan in 2001 when I did that course. I was a civilian. We had people from foreign countries, by the way. We had people from USA, UK, Australia, all over the place. So it's a very nice system of governance where people understand each other. And later on, when we come back to our post, we are able to process their needs very fast, actually. So I thought this was the military perspective I thought I'll share here from the ESG angle. Now coming to Tata's, I have excellent experience with Tata's. Tata Steel has been our mainstay in construction. It's one of the finest steels available compared to even the government steel, which we make there actually. And Tata Consultancy Services, we have used their services very often for design of our buildings. I would like to know from you, maybe you're not directly involved with Air India, but how the Tatas are going to improve there. I'm very keen to know how they're going to turn the tables there.
Well, that's, I think, the billion-dollar question, because there's a lot riding on the success of that acquisition. Obviously, there are some best practices that the group itself has now imbibed because of its partnerships in airlines like Vistara with Singapore Airlines. So some of that capability will be made available at Air India as well. They've just announced, and people may have different points of view on this, a VRA scheme so that employees who are now willing to take a generous settlement package and move on could move on. And in some of the areas where the airline needs a bit more sort of capability, they are planning to do new hires. The entire fleet, to my mind, will have to be overhauled. Certainly the interiors, the cabins, but also some of the aircrafts will have to be replaced. But the airline industry is a business where scale matters. It makes a huge difference. It's one of the reasons an airline like Indigo, for instance, has been so successful till, of course, the last few years when it's been impacted by COVID. But otherwise, the ability to procure on large scale and get very substantial discounts from the aircraft manufacturers is very important in this whole business. So I think if they're going to place large orders, I think there is the potential to bring in state-of-the-art technology, some of the latest fleets of aircraft as well. So I think if they approach it with the willingness to spend capital just now, with the intention that if this brand can be really made to shine, it will carry the Tata name to all parts of the world. And Air India at one time used to have such a reputation. I think in the 60s, even in the 70s, it was a very well-regarded airline. That, I think, should be the ambition of the group. Now, obviously, this will need a lot of capital. I don't know what the current willingness of the Tata Sons board would be to fund it to that extent. I know that there are critical voices on the board that worry that airlines business generally in most parts of the world is loss-making or very, very slim margins. Richard Branson made that famous joke, right, about how to be a millionaire. You start as a billionaire and then acquire an airline. So there will be constraints. But I think right now, on the basis of what one is seeing so far, there seems to be a determination to make Air India, a very well-regarded name in the aviation business. So we'll have to give them time and see how they are able to turn it around. But it will mean investments in technology, investment in people, and a huge amount of capital.
So at this stage, I will say the discussion has been absolutely fabulous. But what is obvious is that with such, experienced people in the pool, there are so many aspects to discuss. And in the interest of time, I will end the session just by saying that we will be having Mukund for another session on another topic that we have briefly covered today, and that will happen sometime in July, August. So, a big thank you to you, Mukund, and a big thank you to Shobna, Pradeep, and Dinesh for the absolutely fabulous discussions today. So, a big round of applause for all of you.
Thank you.
And before I go
Thank you
across
all.
to the next speaker, which is going to be Risha, because from a big picture perspective, end of the day, the proof is all in delivery. And therefore, it's important to look at what is happening at the grassroots. And I will go to Risha to discuss that. And there is some very, very fascinating work in sustainability which they are doing at the grassroots level, which we will discuss. So, uh, big round of applause for all of you and the panelists. If you are still awake, please be awake and ask more questions to Risha and to Naveen. But Mukund, I'll pick you up again and I'll be in touch with you for the next session. I'm looking
Thank you
forward
so
to
much,
that.
Pradeep. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. And thank you to all the panelists, everyone on this call. Really appreciate it.
So now we go across to the other wonderful person, not the person, I should say, the lady, Risha. Risha is an assistant professor at NIT Silchar. She did her PhD from IIT Delhi in 2018. Now, when I was speaking to Risha, it was amazing that Silchar is a place which is in a valley, and a lot of stuff that we take for granted, it's a very different kind of environment. And because Risha is from Northeast, so she chose to be there, although she studied, in Delhi and a whole lot of other places elsewhere. So please give a big the round of applause to Risha. And Risha, let's quickly walk your journey post IIT Delhi. Risha, are you there?
Yes, yes. Thank you, sir. I would firstly like to thank Pradeep sir to give such a wonderful opportunity to share this platform with great leaders and make IITD really, really proud. Thank you, sir. So it's great to connect with all of you. So,
So tell me, Risha, first tell me, why did you choose or take up a job in Silchar?
Okay, so this is an interesting story. I actually, before completing my PhD, I was working in BIT Sindri, Birsa Institute of Technology Sindri, as an assistant professor there. But then it was a contractual job. And after defending my thesis, I started looking for a regular post. And then when I started applying for other institutes. So I got an opportunity to join IIIT Indore, Triple IT Nagpur, sorry, which is in Nagpur, Maharashtra. And I was about to leave to join for assistant professor in IIIT Nagpur. But then in a week notice, I got this call letter from NIT Silchar. So IIIT Nagpur is a really wonderful place. And but then I thought that since I am born and brought up in Assam, why not again go visit the same place and serve for the place where I have been born and brought up. So NIT Silchar seemed to be a wonderful opportunity for me. So I thought of like putting down the offer of IIIT Nagpur and joining NIT Silchar. So that is the time
Lovely.
when
Very nice.
2019
Very nice.
July
Now, I
I
want
joined
you
NIT
also at
Silchar.
this stage, I know that you've prepared a, PowerPoint in terms of the very interesting work that you're doing at the grassroots level. So I would like you to share that with the group over here.
Okay, thank you, sir. So I'm sharing my screen to give a display on what actually I have been doing. My screen is visible to
Yes,
everyone.
yeah, we are able to see the screen.
So as you can see that this is the campus of NIT Silchar. And during my PhD, I have worked on the technology known as thermoelectric generator. And this was a technology that I have been worked along with biomass food stove. So I will be eventually driving you through the story behind all of these technologies, what I have done during my PhD. So as we know, we have renewable sources of energy from solar, hydro, biofuel, tidal, geothermal. So we are all aware of it. But then we have another renewable energy source, that is biomass, which is a less explored field. And we thought of getting more involvement with the biomass energy and trying to harvest energy from biomass. So biomass is a less explored renewable source of energy, which again is consisting 10% of the total renewable energy sources. So this is a huge number. So, but it is then unexplored. So biomass refers to an energy source, but then what we are doing with biomass in India, if I think all of you are from India, have a touch of India. So actually what we are doing here in India in rural areas, that we are burning biomass in the cook stoves and we are trying to cook food. And there are a lot of advantages where people actually find while cooking in an open fire, like we do not have to pay anything for the fuel that we use. We can get that fuel from the nearby places, like we have agricultural residue, we have plant twigs, we have branches, leaves, we have cow dung cakes, charcoal. This can be used for burning the fuel inside the cook stove. So most of the rural part of India are using this procedure of cooking, but there are many hazards, environmental and health hazards that are posed from the cooking of cooking with biomass fuel. So who in 2011 had done number of surveys, and they could find out that 3 billion people over the world are cooking in open fires by burning biomass, and over 4.3 million people die prematurely from illness due to indoor air, household air pollution, and the population comprises of women and children basically. So what we have been doing in India, like our Indian government have initiative known as Ujjwala Yojana, where we provide subsidy for the LPG gas to the rural people. But then the inside story of the Ujjwala Yojana is something else. What we see after survey is people use to take the subsidy to buy LPG gas, but then they have been taking up the old practice of cooking in biomass cook stove and posing environmental as well as health hazards, because buying a LPG cook stove, LPG gas cost them money. So LPG gas with subsidy may cost them around 800 rupees in India. So this is a whole lot of money for a rural household to take up 800 rupees and buy an LPG gas rather than cooking in a open fire with no fuel cost at all. So when we ask whether they have been using these LPG stoves, they will instantly say, yes, we have been using this stove. This has good health benefits and all, but after the survey is over, they will be back to the old cooking habits. So So that was the main reason why we again stick to the traditional way of cooking and finding some alternative way and making the cooking of food in a more cleaner way. So what we have been thinking, like, we will have the same old knowledge of cooking with biomass, but then we can improve the design of the cook stove. Rather than using a 3-stone fire, we can use a improved design of a cook stove and make the users aspire for a product which will give health benefits, as well as they can stick to their biomass fuel, which do not cost them anything. So we have kind of designed a cook stove which is fuel efficient and has less emissions. But the technology behind this, because we have number of cook stoves in India saying the tag of like they are advanced cook stove and give less emissions. So we have cook stoves like natural draft, which do not have any fan or do not need power to work. But then we have forced draft cook stove, which actually need a small fan to drive the air inside the combustion chamber so that the combustion improves. So again, we are talking about a rural household where we actually do not have power in that rural household. So we have to think in that manner. How can we make a cook stove viable where we can use the power to drive the fan and improve the combustion in a greater level? So what we have thought of, like when we are burning biomass, there is a lot of thermal heat generated when we are burning biomass. So what we have thought, like we can use a thermoelectric generator that can be integrated on the wall of the combustion chamber of the cook stove. And that thermoelectric generator can develop power, and that power can be used to drive the fan to make the cook stove a forced draft cook stove. So explaining more about forced draft cook stove, what does this mean? This is actually, if you can see the picture over here, this is a two-chambered cook stove. The inner chamber has small holes inside the inner combustion chamber, and the outer chamber is totally encapsulated. And then we can provide a small fan on the outer chamber so that the air of the fan can be driven inside the inner combustion chamber, and we can improve the combustion of the biomass. So this was the concept of forced draft cook stove. But after integration of thermoelectric generator, we are trying to make this cook stove a standalone self-sustaining cook stove. So yes, there are a number of losses, as you can see. Then we have, what is the idea behind? We have utilized the heat of the biomass burnt. We have then used a thermoelectric generator to convert the heat energy into useful electrical energy.
Excellent, excellent. I see a lot of formulas over here.
So this is little bit to understand how does thermoelectric actually work. So literally this is associated with thermal and electrical phenomena, and where voltage is equal to Seebeck coefficient, and which is proportional to the temperature difference between both the sides of the thermoelectric generator. So we have the basic principle behind. If we join two different wires of different conductivity, and we keep a junction in a hot position and a junction in a cold position, then we have a EMF running in this whole circuitry. So this is a small thermocouple that we can see, but this will generate a very, very minimal voltage. So after the advent of this semiconductors, what scientists have done, they have tried to make a series parallel connections of these semiconductor devices, make a P-type, N-type leg, and then connect it together to get a substantial amount of power output from a small thermoelectric generator. So this is how a thermoelectric generator looks inside. And this is the final design that we have made during my PhD. So I do not know. Pradeep sir was talking about UBA and CRDT. So I was then and there at that at the advent of UBA, Unnat Bharat Abhiyan. This was the brainchild of Professor Rajendra Prasad. Unfortunately, he is not among us. We lost him in COVID, and this was his brainchild about UBA, and sir was my supervisor, and we worked hand to hand together to develop this design. So he was the role model for this whole concept. So again, coming back to the presentation. So this is a design that we have made. If you permit me, may I run this video to show how
Please.
this cook
Yeah,
stove
please do.
works?
Yeah.
Yes, so this is a setup that was made in IITD, and people were engaged in testing these cook stoves with the help of BIS protocol. So let me run this and see how this works wonderfully. So we have this, I'm sorry. So we have this cook stove that runs with thermoelectric generator. The fan that is running here is totally driven with the power of thermoelectric generator. And the fan actually cools the cold side of the thermoelectric generator, and the same air is driven inside the inner combustion chamber, so that the combustion inside the cook stove improves and we have less emissions. And the leftover power that was generated from the thermoelectric generator was actually used to drive a small LED light and even power a Android phone. So this was basically a total setup for a rural household where they are deprived of power. So this was the concept behind. So yes, it was developed then, and I have stopped working after that. Like it has been 5 years till now that we have developed this. We have circulated, we have given this stove to many households. They have been still working. They have been still using this cook stove for cooking food. We had made a survey a few years back, 1 to 2 years back, but still work is going on in field for getting the evaluation done on this cook stove. So this was all about thermoelectric generator cook stove that I had developed during my PhD. So I have taken up this work again in NIT Silchar as well, development of TEG cook stove and testing with the help of BIS protocol. The second thing that I have been working now is to develop a solar photovoltaic powered cane slicing machine. So this is again a DST funded project that I have received recently. So actually what happens in Silchar, there are artisans who work on cane. Cane is a kind of bamboo, not actually bamboo, but the properties of cane is different, but it is a similar kind of bamboo. And this is where you can see that this person here is weaving a mat made up of cane slips. But the idea behind this is they have been doing whole lot of this work physically with their hands manually. So they do not have any mechanized tool to do that. They are using primitive tools like dagger and everything to cut the canes and then make it a sleeve and then process it and weave this kind of mat. So what we thought is, if we can mechanize the slicing of this cane plant, then this whole process of slicing and processing it will be lot less difficult for them than they have been doing manually. So we have designed this machine which actually will slit the cane in small pieces as per their desired dimensions, and this cane slicing machine will be powered with solar photovoltaic. because again, since these are the rural people we are talking about, so they do not have much of power facility for driving this machine. So a solar photovoltaic seemed to be a very reasonable technology to drive the machine when there is no power in the household. So yes, this is another technology that I have been working now. This is in design status, design and manufacturing status. And if you allow, I can show you the people that they are working, how they are working with this cane plant, and manually how they are doing the things. Will it be okay if I play the video?
Yeah, please do.
Okay, thank you. So this is the woman in the household there. She's slipping it all by herself with a very primitive dagger in her house also.
I think the biggest message that I'm seeing across when I listen to the presentation and see the videos is the social impact and how we are making a difference at the grassroots level at potentially low price points.
Right, sir.
This has been very good, Risha. I really enjoyed, and I will now ask the panel members if any questions they would like to ask of Risha or any perspectives they want
Yes.
to throw. And again, Shobna, anything you want to ask or give your perspectives?
I would just say I found this extremely inspiring. Thank you so much, Risha, for sharing. It was a new information for me. So thanks for doing this work and for having the impact you're having. Just curious in terms of the scale of the effort. So far, you mentioned you've shared, you've provided the cooking stoves to many households. Could you talk about like the plans for scaling this further, like how are you getting the funding and plans to scale this further?
Yes.
Risha,
So while I
can
was,
you stop the share screening?
yes, sure. Did I put down the slide? No.
Anyway, continue the discussions while we figure out how to stop this.
Right. So regarding scaling, so initially when I was developing this cook stove, so after the design was complete, so professor had some funding from ministry, MNRE, and Berkeley Air, and some funding agencies were there at that point of time. But this was a very small pilot program that we were having at that point of time. So after that, I think the scaling up and building up a startup or industry kind of manufacturing unit has not been developed after I left IIT. So yes, that stopped then and there, and there is no such things going around like for scaling up things in India. So what I thought, like, it would be best if I can take up the work again and then try to proceed in my way, because since after professor, so there we do not have much of a person to work on this field. So I do have a project of a DST project, of course, which has funding for TEG cook stoves and building up the testing setup in NIT Silchar. So, and again, that is a small pilot kind of thing. I will have to build around 30 to 40 stoves and make up a small pilot in the nearby area. And again, I have to work on building scaling up the product, how to do that. I'll have to work on that. It is yet to be done.
Fabulous. Now, I also see a comment by Pradeep Kapoor. Now, Pradeep, if you're still there, you can ask Risha. Risha, Pradeep is looking at, would you like to get involved into the November conference which Wheels is organizing in Banaras?
I would love to, sir. It will be a great opportunity for me then.
So
Can
I
you
will
share
connect
your
you with
contact
Pradeep
details,
Kapoor. And
Risha?
Pradeep, over to you if you want to ask Risha anything.
Yeah, in the sense that, it's very interesting, very fascinating, the work that you're doing. Congratulations. Very essential,
Yes.
very useful at the ground root level and at the rural level. So, we may request you to make a presentation in the, sustainable livelihoods track or whichever other track it's appropriate. So, how do we connect? Can you share your contact details?
I will
Yes,
And
connect.
absolutely.
I will connect you with Risha PK.
Okay,
oh, sure.
that
Thank
will be
you.
nice. Thank you,
Wonderful.
sir.
Thank you, Pradeep.
Thank you,
Thank
sir.
you.
Dinesh, anything that you would like to ask?
Excellent presentation, grassroots, pioneering work, and I think big contribution to the climate. Nothing to exactly connected with this. We in Leh, Ladakh, altitude of 11,000 feet, where temperatures are below minus 30, we had a problem in handling the human excreta. In fact, I contacted authorities in America at that time to find burners to burn the excreta because we have no way to, at that point of that temperature, it gets frozen, the excreta, and there's no way to handle it actually. I used to have that problem there. This is the area where today the Indo-Chinese standoff is going on actually. This is exactly that area. So what we did, we invited the public health authorities and they brought a biodigester and we connected that to our toilets. And strangely, at low temperature, the biodigester was working. I don't know, and it was handling the things very well actually. And then we could dispose of the waste material into the Shaik River ultimately. But that is my experience I had. Otherwise, we have used aerobic digesters for our sewage disposal systems and all, where we mix oxygen with the thing and then dispose it off to the farmers in the fields actually. It was very popular in Fazilka in Punjab during 1971. I mean, we used to do that actually.
Excellent.
That is my experience.
Oh, excellent. I mean, I'm kind of really surprised looking at what kind of challenges you were solving at such high altitudes, and I'm also looking at what kind of solutions Risha is developing at the grassroots level. So
Thank you.
absolutely fabulous. So with
One,
that, a big
one
round of
small,
applause. Hmm? Yes, you were
one
saying?
small, one small suggestion, if I can make to the
Yes,
next.
please, please.
Since this is human excreta we are talking about, so what if we can convert the excreta into a biogas digester so that we
Fabulous.
can convert the excreta into electricity or any kind of fuel that we can. So biogas may be a thing that you can work on. Like if you have excess amount of these excreta, you can put it in a biogas plant, and then you can generate electricity out of it, which can maybe run some devices which you would like to run. So that may be
Nice.
one
I
option.
think I'll pass this on to the people there now.
Yeah, this is so nice, looking at the
Thank you.
circular economy. I mean, I love it. So please give a big round of applause to Risha. Risha, it was absolutely lovely. And, we will keep you more involved with GCC and with the community that we are building and look forward to engaging further with you in this. And I will connect you with Pradeep
Thank you,
Kapoor
sir.
so that we can have the discussion in regard to the November conference as well. Now, let
Thank
me
you for
go.
having me, sir.
It was lovely. Now let's go across to Naveen. I don't know whether Naveen is still there or he's dropped off because we've gone well over time. But the session has been so this thing I was hesitant to curtail it back. Naveen, are you there?
I'm still here. Yes.
So sweet, so sweet. So,
Yeah.
ladies and gentlemen, I'm delighted to introduce Naveen. IIT Delhi graduate who's worked in the oil rigs with Schlumberger, then did his MBA from NCAD, and because he likes to work in altitudes, initially with oil rigs, landed up in Switzerland so that he can be on the Alps. And he now lives in Switzerland and he works with Siemens in a global business role. So please give a big round of applause to Naveen. Naveen, tell us first of all, When did you finish IIT Delhi? And the big bucks that Slumberger was paying you, were they not enough to entice you to stay back?
That's true. Okay, so I graduated in 2007. So I did a BTech in mechanical engineering. And actually, I did in 2006 also internship with Schlumberger. Uh, and from there, actually, I got the offer to actually work with Schlumberger. And I was working more or less everywhere. I worked in China in very some remote places, searching for oil. Also worked in Oman, UAE, US, also somewhere in Indian Ocean, KG Basin as well in Bay of Bengal, that really remote place. It was really exciting to work in this condition. It was quite challenging as well because it's 24/7. And also sometimes you feel that you have also a little bit, if you're not careful enough, that it could also be some danger to your life as well, right? So I think it's a really interesting situation to work in. But of course, I think that was really good to get experience, but that was not my long run goal to stay there, even though the money and everything was good. I knew that in the long run, I think hydrocarbons will not have, of course, in short to mid run, I think that we still need the hydrocarbons to survive the economy. But I think in the long run, I was more somehow thinking that, okay, this is something not going to work out. And I need to also then diversify myself and learn about more other industries. And that's where I really said that, okay, let's go do an MBA and then see, okay, what do I want to do next, right? And
So,
there,
was it sustainability or was it the money which motivated you to do your MBA?
no, as in it was really to change. As in money was enough at Schlumberger, and actually I didn't want to stay back because otherwise you just get used to it and you know how the job is,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
it gets too comfortable, and then I just did not want to get too comfortable.
No,
That's what
I
it was.
was only joking. So, now let me ask you, what is your current role with Siemens?
So currently I am heading a thermostat product line, which is automating the temperature control in the rooms, right? So that
Now,
these rooms could be in residential areas. These rooms could also be in commercial buildings, hotels, hospitals, and it's a very critical part of the whole comfort because it's not only temperature but also the air quality, right? I think that's the product line which I had globally right now.
and is this a global role?
Yeah, that's a global role actually.
Now,
Yeah.
this whole discussion which has been emerging over the last couple of years, ever since the nuclear disaster in Japan, and then, looking at what was happening across during the COVID times, and now with the Ukraine war, the whole
Mhm.
model of globalization has come into question.
Mhm.
Now,
Yeah.
is that something which you at an organization level are also debating, discussing as to what is the model of globalization now in the brave new world?
So right now, as you pointed out correctly, right, that we were really just pre-COVID and then this pre-conflict re- era, we were really focusing on, let's say, global footprint, right? I think we will have suppliers somewhere based in other part of the country, and then we'll have warehouses somewhere else, and then they will get centrally allocated, and then they are shipped out to all different countries, and this whole model actually now comes into a little bit question, right? Because when the borders close, right, we were even facing situation, for example, if we're shipping products from, let's say, from India to China, right? So the products will actually get tested, COVID tested, right? That you don't find COVID
Oh,
on them.
I
Yeah,
see.
exactly. Yeah, we also had cases that actually there was a product which actually even made it to the factory back, and then and they later on figured out that they actually the product had COVID positive.
Oh
So
my God.
yeah. So that actually now brought all these, let's say, globalization or let's say whole way of managing things centrally a little bit into question. And right now, I think we are in process of somehow seeing that, okay, how could we actually secure our supply chains in a better way? Because right now we're a little bit struggling, I think, like most of the industry, especially with the semiconductors, because large part of these products are coming from China, and we are looking at also now ways how could we actually diversify. We're also looking at India as a possible option in the future. Also in the Americas, we look into Mexico's, for example, to see that, okay, we don't want to now really uh,
So I
have
see two perspectives. One is at a
yeah,
tactical level that you got to keep the show running.
yeah.
But at a strategic level, Are you looking at redesigning the global supply chain?
So right now, the idea is to somehow, at least in the mid run, to look at ideas that how could we actually have, we diversify the supply chain a little bit, right? I think this is really the strategy that we go more from, let's say, uh, somehow a hybrid approach where there is more local for local possible, right? Yeah.
But then, how long would it take you to
It'll
set
take
up the
long.
new supply chains?
It'll take a really long time because we really need to work with our suppliers as well, right? Because also with our factories, also with our warehouses. So I think right now it's really on strategic level to find a solution there. Once we have a solution, then I think implementation could take maybe 1.5 to 2 years or so. So it's not we cannot switch from one day to the other day. I think that's the point, right? I think this is.
So the bottom line is that we are going to see these kind of challenges for another couple of years,
Yeah.
while different companies figure out what works best for them.
Exactly. Yeah.
But
I think.
what about services? This is in terms of products. Now services you can easily co-locate or relocate in different parts of the world. Now, does your role also involve services or only product supply?
So my role is actually largely on the product itself, right? I think it's pretty much designing this thermostats next, doing the whole product lifecycle management of this product category that I'm responsible for. And yeah, I think with services, I think we have, so the business that I actually work with is, so in Siemens, we have smart infrastructure as one big business. And within that business, there are product business units. So there is business unit taking care of building products, which is all products which are going around the buildings. There is electrical products. Apart from that, we also have a service business unit, which is actually taking all these products and they're going for big projects, right? I think, and then that business unit is actually taking care of the service part.
So at this stage, Shobna, are you still there? Just want to check.
I'm still here.
So thank you so much for still staying awake. Now, I would ask you that you come with a strong business operational background. You are working with a health company at the moment. Now, what are your perspectives on globalization of the supply chains, or for that matter, for service delivery chains? What is the thinking currently, and do you think that we'll be able to? Okay, let me get your perspectives first.
Yeah. I know as Naveen was speaking, I was kind of thinking about some of the experiences I hear about here. And again, the supply chain constraints are real. I mean, we hear about that in our workplace as well as, in the friend circle that we have here. So some of the things are real in terms of, planning for, delays or, ensuring safety stocks for certain weeks and planning the logistics. And I think that will become more and more important and central to how operations are run at companies in terms of planning for these delays, disruptions in supply chain. So Naveen, I feel for you in terms of how challenging that is, and I think it's a real challenge.
So when you look at services, because in your past when you're in consulting or with LinkedIn, etc., how looking at what is happening in Ukraine at this particular point in time, or for that matter, if similar kind of calamities happen in different parts of the world, and how easy or difficult is it to redesign your value chains or service delivery chains?
As Naveen was talking about it, I think product supply chain is obviously, I would say, harder than the services side. I think services can be adapted, I think, relatively easily compared to like product supply chain, hardware, where you have like physical goods moving across borders, across countries. I think that is harder, especially like, now with remote environment, remote work, a lot of the services can be provided without actually, commuting or traveling. So that's I feel is relatively easier compared to some of the hardware delivery issues, product delivery issues that Naveen was talking about?
I will, of course, come back to the supporting infrastructure in terms of data centers, etc., in another discussion. But now I move across to Dinesh. Dinesh, you've been uh, very much involved into the delivery side. So, any perspectives, any questions that you have for Naveen?
Firstly, I was surprised to know that products were COVID tested. I mean, that was a real tough one, actually. Secondly, if we have to maintain inventory to overcome this difficulty, then a lot of money will also get locked up in the inventory, actually, in the process.
Yeah.
And then less money is available for the execution, then, actually.
That's true.
Also, if I come up to another point, for example, wheat. Now, Ukraine produces one of the maximum quantity of wheat in the world, actually. And the ports coming under Russia now, from where the wheat was being exported, there are two countries, especially Egypt and Turkey, who Egypt virtually, I think, takes 80% of its wheat requirement from outside. So India sent some 50,000 tons to Turkey, some durum wheat, I remember, and Turkey has rejected that. Now probably that is being directed to Egypt. Probably Egypt also is considering it. So there will be problems, not only your products, but the problems of the various survival of the people, actually. If the food supply chain gets stuck up, I don't know what are the solutions. Then we come down to what Mr. Modi is advocating, being Atmanirbhar. That means all countries will have to try to get maximum things made in their own country. Though we still get tons of things from China even today. All Diwali and other stuff comes in India from China even today. But then probably that Atmanirbhar, at least in defense now, has become very important. Earlier defense equipment was bought from outside. The QR was set up so high that our R&D probably could not produce things like that. But now I think they have adjusted it to the R&D and the production in the country. A lot of defense equipment is now being produced in India itself. Because, in the times of war, people just cut you off from the maintenance parts. It's very simple. 71 war, the USA and UK just cut off our parts to the spare parts for the thing, and Russia came to help us, actually. So Atmanirbhar probably seems to be one of the options in my view.
Yeah, I think this local for local, I think that's going to play a role. I think it's not going to be 100% local to local. I think we need somehow a hybrid model. And also, I think the reason why we face this problem, because let's say pre-COVID, what large amount of companies, which they were doing is that they were really focusing on this return on capital employed, right? So you will try to reduce inventories everywhere because that's your capital employed, right? And then if you have the minimum amount of inventory of the products, so you have really a higher rate return, right? Yeah. But that model actually fails once you have a let's say this pandemic or
just in
or
time
maybe
is
a
no
war,
more
right?
valid now. Just in time model is no more valid.
Just in time, I think it's going to get disrupted because it's just, it could be possible local to local, right? I think you could still do just in time, but I think in the global footprint, when you just in time actually depends crossing borders from China to maybe to India to Europe to going to the US. I think that just in time is you can forget about in pandemic times, right? So we somehow need to find also from metric perspective, right? Because if you really focus on this return on capital employed, that really forces all companies all across, right, which is following this metric to reduce their inventory, right? Because they would not like to keep reduce all kind of capital employed to the lowest possible. Right? That's a little bit the challenge. And now it's you could see maybe also from the matrix, if you look at the company reports, that the capital capital goods, I think, or inventory which companies have, right? So that has actually gone up. So the whole metric of ROCE, which we call, is actually going down, right? Return on capital employed is going down because now everybody's trying to build up inventories to make sure that they're able to secure supply chain for next 1.5 to 2 years. So we placed really large orders to really try to now forecast. I think initially the forecast was we could really forecast for the short run. Now we really need to think 1.5 to 2 years ahead and make sure that we are able to pool and bundle all our orders and then we place them, right? I think this is how we are now trying to somehow.
Your products may be non-perishable, but you can't
exactly.
have large inventory.
You cannot do it. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's not possible. You can't stock wheat for A long time. We can't stock cement for a long time. I mean, they start getting bad actually over a period of time.
Yeah, exactly. I think for perishable goods, I think that's
there's going to be
you'll have a lot of
difficulty.
waste. You'll have a lot of waste. I think if
you can't store tons of oil. You can't. You may have hundreds of ships then on the seas, high seas, carrying your oil all the time. I mean, you can't do those things.
Yeah, exactly. That's why the oil price was going in negative, right? I think after this COVID, just after this COVID period, because the whole demand side was actually going down, and then people were really looking, as in people need to pay for the storage, right? And nobody was willing to actually then buy oil
storage
because
costs
storage. And now it's the opposite, right? Because of the war, now the oil price is going in.
What this gets me is that we need a separate discussion on this itself, because it's such a topical subject, and we've got some nice people like Manmohan, who's at London School of Economics, as well as Sunil, who's at Kellogg's, who are focused onto supply chains. So it's really definitely giving me an idea to have a discussion point on that. Now, if that be the case, then I think I will call it a day, purely in the interest of time. We've gone, very much ahead of time, but I think the discussion was absolutely fabulous. And let's give a big round of applause to Naveen, to Risha, to Mukund, to Shobna, to Pradeep, and to Dinesh for making the whole discussion such an interesting one today. So, ladies and gentlemen, enjoy your morning cup of coffee, evening glass of wine, or in the case of Dinesh and Shobna, I don't know what they would prefer to have, a cup of tea, coffee, wine, or nothing, and just go out to sleep. So, bye from Pradeep in Sydney. Take care, and we'll be in touch with you for ongoing discussions.
Thanks a lot. Bye bye.